call the roll.
Alderman Williamson,
Here.
Alderman Davis,
Present.
Alderman Cone, Alderman Arnowitz,
Here.
Alderman Kotar,
Here.
Alderwoman Green,
She's running around here, she'll be back. Hey.
Alderwoman Tyus,
Present.
President Reed. You have 5 present, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Members of the committee, Alderwomen, Aldermen. We are having this meeting as more of a, not because of a board bill, but as I was going through some of the personnel things and just brush it up myself since I became chair of public employees, I found out there's some things that I had forgotten or that had changed. And oftentimes we jump into doing and changing things or saying how we want things to change, and we don't even know at this point what they are anymore. And I know that we have an expert here. And so I invited the Director of Personnel, Richard Frank, to come and talk to us and to give us a primer. I want to say that sometimes I've been in committees and people have said that people who are not on the committee cannot ask questions. I will never do that. When I was a young alderperson, that's how I learned. I went to a lot of things that I was not on, but the senior alder people always allowed me to ask questions. So that will always be our rule. Everybody who's on the committee will ask as many questions as they want to first. And then if they don't have any questions, then people not on the committee. Alderwoman, if you want to sit at the table, you can, okay? Because we have room. So I'm going to ask you to please come forward and sit here at the end. Don't sit at the end. That's where the. You can sit by Jack. He won't bite.
I won't.
And if he does, it won't be hard. Okay. And thank you for coming.
Thank you very much,
I appreciate it.
honorable members of the committee, for having me here.
Okay, I don't know how to operate that chair. Somebody tell. Oh, you got
I'm a
it.
mechanical idiot.
Well, these are a lot better chairs than we used to have, so we're thankful for that. But I wanted you to come here and just, we're going to ask questions, but first I would love if you could just give us a little overview about civil service and personnel and how they work, you know, and what you see as your responsibilities. And then we will, by seniority, allow people to ask questions or
Sounds great.
make points, okay?
Well, thank you, ma'am. First of all, I'll say that just as a historical primer, the city leaders back in the 1940s felt that there was so much corruption that they needed to create a strong civil service system. And as a result, Article 18, known as the Civil Service Act, was adopted by the voters. So really the authority of the Civil Service Commission and the Director of Personnel and the responsibilities that we have are under Article 18. Specifically, Article 18, Section 6 addresses the Civil Service Commission. And what the Civil Service Commission does is really hear any appeals from employees who take exception with either discipline or any action of the director, myself, or the various appointing authorities. So they, within 10 days of being notified of any adverse employment action, can appeal directly to the commission. And we have 3 commissioners who are appointed by the mayor for 4-year terms. One is Steve Barney, he's the chairperson, former head of SSM's HR. Stanley Newsom.
Hold on, and will you tell us how long they've served?
Yes, it's been about over 10 years
Okay.
for Mr. Barney, probably about close to 12. He's been the chairperson for a number of years, and again, he was with SSM HR. And then we have Stanley Newsom, who's been on the committee the entire 14 years I've been here. He's a former fire chief. And then we have Leo Donahue, who's a labor advocate. He's got an MBA from WashU and is affiliated with the local electricians, IBW Local 1. So they serve their terms.
Wait a minute, how long has he been there?
He's been there about 2 years now.
Okay.
So he's a relative newcomer, but learning quickly. The commission hears all of its appeals. Again, they have to be filed. And then as secretary to the commission, I'm responsible for making sure that the minutes are taken, the agendas are posted online. I also review all of the findings of fact and conclusions of law. I know Madam Tyus here is an attorney, so she would understand that, but the commission doesn't hear the cases themselves. They used to. Now we have hearing officers who do that. And you're entitled to a hearing anytime you have a loss of money. Now, it used to be under the civil service rules that if you had a suspension of 3 days or more, you got a hearing. But we tried to find out what the different judges thought was a de minimis, a minimum level of loss of pay, and nobody agreed. Judge Evelyn Baker thought it was 2 days. Some other judges in the state civil service system thought it was 5 days. Well, then Judge Durker had a case, and he told me, Rick, I'm not going to order you to do it, but I think it's 1 hour. So we took a very conservative approach, very employee-friendly, and said, anytime you have a loss of pay, even 1 hour, you have a right to a hearing. The hearings are over in the courthouse. The union reps are allowed to sit at the table, but some people are pro se, meaning they represent themselves, but many of our people are represented by attorneys. And each of our hearing officers are qualified employment attorneys. And I'm proud to say that the respect of the commission, the process has grown to where I just hired 3 judges, former judges, to hear cases. Judge Sweeney, Judge Frawley, and Judge Grady. And I think it's going to bring even a higher level of respect and integrity to the process. They report to me, and some of the junior attorneys, we like a lot of diversity. We have some young attorneys, and when they prepare their briefs for the commission, I review them to make sure that they're, that there's nothing that's missing in terms of credibility or any kind of findings of fact or conclusions of law. The commission makes its ruling, and then at the next meeting, they would ratify the decision. The commission's decision is final, provided, however, that the person can then take it to circuit court. If they get a hearing, it's just a judicial review, meaning the judge just would look at it on paper and determine whether or not they thought the commission erred or not. The other process, though, is when a person just doesn't have a hearing, they have what we call a written submission process. And all these policies are online. The written submission process is very friendly because it allows employees who don't have the money or might be nervous about going to a hearing to have their say. The city has to go first, the appointing authority, then the employee, and it goes back and forth. 21 days, 14, and then that gets submitted to the commission for review. And the commission makes its decision. If the employee doesn't like that decision, they can also appeal to circuit court, and there's not any kind of time frame. If they get a hearing, they have to appeal to the court within 30 days. Here, though, there's no time frame, and they can appeal it at any time, and they get what's called a trial de novo, meaning they get a full trial over in the circuit court. So the smart employee might think, do I want to have a hearing or not? Maybe I'd rather have the whole thing in front of a judge. So that's how the commission works. The meetings are recorded. We had one commissioner in the past who seemed to not remember what the minutes were or disagreed with them, so we thought, we'll fix that, we'll just record them. But the commission's been functioning quite well. I have a young lady, Ashley McLean, who does a fantastic job for us, and it's been efficient. My job, again, as secretary, is to work with the hearing officers. Sometimes I have a hearing officer who goes off the reservation and maybe takes too long. I have one, for instance, who billed too many hours compared to everybody else, and it's my job just to do the general housekeeping for the commission. As director of personnel, I'm charged with maintaining the integrity of the civil service system, and sometimes that puts me at odds with political figures, because my job is to keep politics out, and in my 14 years I've done that to the best of my ability. And we have a full functioning HR department. We have a training and organizational development, and if you ever want any training, we will come on site and bring it to anyone. We've done that for the license collector, we've done it for the prosecuting attorney. Ironically enough, we had to do sexual harassment training under Jennifer Joyce because some of her attorneys were acting inappropriately, and I thought as attorneys we didn't have that. We've done trainings for the recorder of deeds, a number of different offices. But the training and organizational development will provide all the important classes on sexual harassment, drug and alcohol training, mandatory classes that each new manager in the system has to have. Also, it provides a new employee orientation and introduces all the employees into what the civil service rules are, what our Department of Personnel Administrative regulations are, etc. Then we have a classification and compensation system. That section is responsible for doing job studies, keeping statistics, doing salary surveys to make sure that we're competitive, making sure that there aren't any internal equities. We respond to the departments, and we keep records of any of those studies, of when they're going to be approved, when they're not. We give assistance in terms of restructuring. Sometimes we'll find out that maybe, and it's my opinion that the city's still too top-heavy in terms of management, But, and we had a study back in 2006 called PFM, and the chairperson may want a copy of this. It was done by PFM, and
I do.
basically it was to try and expand the control, because we found that each city manager only had on an average 5 employees. Well, for a public entity, it should at least be 7. If you're looking corporate, I know you know this, Alderman Davis, is more like 15 or 20.
Right.
So the study was published in 2006, and my department immediately adopted the changes. We eliminated 3 management positions. We ran more smoothly. But I've been asking the administration to go back and say, hey, along with the state audit, look and see if these departments have actually taken the recommendations that were made back in 2006.
They haven't.
No, they haven't. So I'm hoping that that will happen. Would you like me to send you a copy of that?
Please. Is it something large?
It is, but I'll have copies made.
Okay, I was gonna say, or else I'll have my secretary, what you send me, I then have copies made so that the
I will
committee can have.
send it.
Okay,
Because it is an important study along, with that state audit, and I think that before we go trying to invent the wheel, I think, our city operating department should be held accountable, saying, hey, did you do this or not?
question, can you send that digitally?
I can have my secretary scan it.
Because I don't like to use paper, and then if people want paper, I'll have it printed out, otherwise I can send it to each of the committee
I'll have her
members.
scan it and
Thank
send
you,
it to you.
appreciate it.
Then there's an employee relations section, it's headed up by Sylvia Donaldson, a very talented woman. That section does all the city's family medical leave. I think recently we hopefully assisted the Board of Aldermen in resolving a
She
matter.
was very professional. She helped
Thank
us a
you.
lot.
I appreciate, she's a wonderful, wonderful leader. She does the family medical leave, does all the drug and alcohol testing. We found out that the police department, prior to us taking over, didn't even do breathalyzers. They did not test for alcohol. And I said, that's gonna change. Then Mr. Order and I had conversation, and we have a good relationship. He wasn't too happy with me, and I was like, no, you're gonna be tested.
Now, you and I really have had a long
We've got more discussions coming about that,
Oh,
I
we
know.
sure do.
So they do all the drug and alcohol, all the fitness for duty. If we have somebody who needs a psychological, recently we had a person who was very disturbed. For instance, we had an electrician who was afraid, sitting in a closet, we found him in the dark, who was afraid of electricity. Tree trimmers who were afraid to get up on a ladder, all sorts of psychological problems. We will send them to Barnes for fitness for duty. She administers that. She does a service rating appeal. If any of our employees are not happy with their rating and they get an unsuccessful, they get to appeal that to my board. And 3 members of my staff, in an impartial manner, sit and actually have a hearing. And they reverse a number of the different operating departments. It's an actual hearing, and they have to provide proof of why they rated these people. Did you have performance standards? Did you meet them? Was this communicated to you? And a lot of times we'll find that, the departments have not done what they needed to do, so they have that authority to recommend to me. And again, if I make my determination and the employee doesn't agree, they can appeal to the Civil Service Commission. I haven't had one of those appeals in the last 5 years, so the system seems to work. They also handle grievances. We used to not have a formal grievance policy. It stopped at the department level. Now we have a formal grievance policy that goes all the way up through the department director and ultimately to me, and I make the final determination. The commission doesn't handle grievances, but if I make a recommendation to the department and they don't accept my recommendation, it gives the employee legal grounds to say somebody who can speak on behalf of the city, myself, has sided with me, and then I call a meeting with the director of operations and or the chief of staff, and we sit down with the department director and find out why they are not complying with the grievance resolution. Now, our collective bargaining agreement with the SLPLA, which we inherited, but we've changed some, it's about 60 pages long. They have a different kind of grievance process, which I'll go into later. And then finally, the employee relations unit, 2 things. They also do, they do investigations of EEOC and MCHR, and I'm very proud of what Sylvia does. We do thorough cradle-to-grave investigations anytime there's a complaint filed. And what that allows us to do is to really minimize our risk. Because if we see a sexual harassment case occurring, or we see a violation, we make a recommendation, a finding and a recommendation that goes to the appointing authority. We were asked by the judiciary to do it on the prior sheriff. So because of the problems under Sheriff Murphy,
Yes.
we took over all the investigations, all the EEOC and MCHR. And we have found that that's very successful because then EEOC or MCHR gets our big report and they see that we have done our due diligence, that we've investigated very thoroughly. And again, Sylvia heads up that unit, and we have a much higher rate of winning those cases now than we had in the past. So she does those. And then lastly, I guess, well, she does labor relations on a department level. So while I negotiate as the chief negotiator for the city, the employee relations unit will go out and facilitate a department MOU. So if the airport right now is meeting with ASME, Sylvia or one of her staff will go out and facilitate that, and we're currently involved in that process. That's that unit. Then we have our personnel services, and what we do is we work with the payroll office and the mayor's, or I'm sorry, the comptroller's office to make sure that all the payroll records are correct. Work very closely with the operating departments to make sure that raises go through, the adjustments to pay are going through. I was sharing with Alderman Davis, we discovered that one police sergeant was getting $5,600 per pay period in overtime. $5,600 in addition to his $2,600 raise. You know, we also discovered that, and we're doing an investigation, I've sent it to the mayor. We found that, and after they were doing it on the payroll, they got sneaky. They started doing an adjustment to pay, which is a different kind of form. So instead of running it through the payroll, they thought they'd go through the back door. Well, we caught that too. So that's really that job of personal services, is to make sure that the payroll is processed appropriately and thoroughly. We have a section on benefits, which we have combined with the police. By combining, the year before last, by combining the police benefits with the benefits with the regular city employees, off the top, we saved $4.1 million. So we are now kind of equalizing those benefits. And it's a huge responsibility, but as sitting chairs of public employees and then health and hospitals, you know, we'll notify the members of the Board of Aldermen because you have votes on that committee, and we report back about that, of course. We have a section on two different retirement sections. I'm over FRP, Firefighters Retirement Plan. We used to pay $48,000 a year into each year for each single firefighter. By making changes to the plan, we were able to still give firefighters a good pension, but we reduced that down to under $28,000. So we save $20,000 per person. I'm the secretary and administrator for that plan. I'm really happy to say that prior to us taking over that plan, 5 years ago, the average age of the person on disability retirement was 39 years old. And 52% of the police or firefighters who are on retirement were on disability. Since we've changed it, we've only had 7 disabilities in 5 years. So it just shows you what due diligence can do. And then lastly, we have the employees retirement system, which you're all members of. And one of the things I'm looking at is possibly changing the drop program. We'll still have a drop.
Ending it.
Not ending it, and anybody who's in it, but we can make it cost neutral by saying that after you come out of drop, you have to start a new period of service. And that can save the city, we believe, between $1.5 and $2 million. But I'm glad to say that in the 14 years I've been here, we've beaten our rate of return 11 years, 11 out of the 14.
Repeat it. So you say you're changing the drop services?
We're going to discuss it, and that would go in front of you if we do it. But we're just looking at changing the drop so that it's not so costly.
It is costly, that's why
It is.
we ended it in 3 different entities that I sat on boards. We ended the drop program because it was just costing us too much money.
Yeah.
And the number of employees that would retire and then want to come back to work, they're just playing a game with us, and you can't
is.
afford that anymore.
The Alderwoman is right. We don't have one for FRP. FRP does not have a drop. There's state legislation now that will change the. Pardon?
Oh, you can finish, and then there's some questions, so we're gonna
Okay.
kind of pause and let people ask questions.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
The drop program is proposed to be changed. It's tied up in the Senate, I believe, right now for police. And then I'm negotiating with all the unions to change drops so that if you could still have a drop, but then you can't add your years of service. You know, you can't, you hit 30, you go into drop, then you start back at 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will save between $1.5 and $2 million, we believe. So that's what I'm proposing to the unions. But we've never had any audit exceptions in the 14 years I've been here with ERS. Again, it's not me, it's that I have really wonderful managers. I'm Denise Draghi, who I know Alderman Arnowitz knows her. We try and give really good customer service. We have a meeting with each and every employee prior to them retiring about what the best ways for them to move their money might be and what their options are. I'm trying to think if there's any other sections that I've neglected. Of course, this got employee relations, training OD, class and comp, benefits. Oh, and in recruitment examination, pardon me. That's a huge one because, you know, we've got about 40 positions that are difficult to fill, and I know the Board of Aldermen will weigh on the issue of residency, but we've gone to about, I think, about 30 or 40 job fairs in the last 2 years. We reach out to the universities. The last time we hired for entry-level firefighters, we decided to go to more of a grassroots campaign, so we went to 30 churches and community organizations and civic groups, etc. Both 73 and Fire got together and formed a program where they're going out to schools, high schools, to try and get those people into EMT jobs. They can't be a firefighter till, you know, they're 21, but we figure if we get these kids in high school, it gives them a place to be. And Judge Jimmy Edwards just did a wonderful thing with our recruitment exam, and what he did is developed a cadet program. So, and the board I know is possibly giving some money to that, and what it'll do is it'll allow him to go out and our recruiters to go out to the high schools and get these kids into police cadet program, and they will be paid $13 an hour when they're 18.
Is that for police and fire or just police?
Just for police at this
Okay.
point. It's like a pilot program.
Okay.
And they'll get $13 an hour plus, I think it's like 15 hours of credit they'll get their
Right.
coursework paid for. Then the second year of the program, they move up to $15 an hour when they're 19. And then when they're 20 and a half, they get even more. I think it's 20 hours they'll get paid, and they get their coursework, and then they'll be able to sit for the examination for the police academy. We've also done with a recruitment exam a program that we've tried to publicize and send it out, that if any city employee who's full-time refers someone to the police academy and they get through the academy, they get a $500 bonus. So we're kind of working on those efforts, doing a lot of advertising. Now we've got police vehicles with banners on them for our I guess it's our HEO2s, our refuse people. It's hard to compete because a lot of that's been privatized, so now we've got banners on them as well. One of the things I wanted to talk about that I'm really happy about is for years I never sat down with Fire. Fire would try and go, they were unhappy with the promotional processes for years. There's been a lot of litigation, and they would go to the mayor's office, and the mayor's office, you know, really didn't talk to me or have a lot of communication with me. So even though our test results were good, we went through federal mediation, and Fire and I signed last year, it didn't get much press, a 12-year historic settlement agreement. And what it did is we were able to talk to each other and gain some trust and change the way we test for promotionals for fire captain and bat chief. Now, every time there's a panel, there's two people, two blacks and two non-blacks, so that there's diversity equal, and we've committed to that. Plus, there's a process where now the written test, which used to be multiple choice, which has been shown to have more adverse impact, now that's simply pass-fail. And after our first test, we'll go back to see if we want to keep it that way or not. We went through the process where we allow them to have feedback on the RFP, the construction of it, and the settlement agreement's quite interesting. And I don't know if I've shared that with you, Alderman, but I'd be glad to send you a copy of that too.
You sent me about the reverse discrimination lawsuit, but I would love to see
Settlement,
something.
I'll scan that too, because it's really historic, and unfortunately it didn't get a lot of press, but I was able to work with Dave Pruitt and Percy Green, and it just was really a positive development in the history, because Now, we have agreed that we are not going to sue each other for the next 12 years. We're going to sit down at the table and work this out
That
and see
makes
how the
more
process
sense.
goes. So, the last thing that I didn't mention, is maybe the most important to this committee too, is the Department of Personnel has the responsibility for negotiating with all 13 unions, and it's not easy. I get beat up, I'm tired from it, but we've already got an agreement with the police officers till 2020. We've reached an agreement with the carpenters till 2020. We're very close to reaching an agreement with the trades, and today I came very close with ASME, and I believe with the Civilian Personnel Division. That then will lead me to develop the compensation ordinance, which I then give to the Civil Service Commission. The commission holds a public hearing. And after that public hearing, it comes to the Board of Aldermen. And every year I've been here, it comes to the Public Employees Committee. And that's really your chance to look, for me to explain what we're trying to propose and why. And that compensation ordinance becomes yours. That is the legal binding document for which all civil service people get paid. And even the mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen and the comptroller's salaries are fixed in that compensation ordinance. So, this committee is tremendously important because that's the document for all civil service employees and even the accepted positions. So even the mayor's political appointees are in that compensation ordinance. And that's my job is to develop that. And then your responsibility, and many of you have been on this committee, is to hear it and
Keep looking.
and make changes, suggest changes, et cetera. So I think that's sort of a summary of what we do, what our job is to do, and of course, to keep the board, advised of, any things that might affect the compensation of city employees. So that's my summary, if it's not too
Thank you.
long.
No, it wasn't. No, eyebrows are starting to go up. I always like that.
Hold
Okay,
on to my chair.
we're gonna have you ask questions, and we're gonna start by seniority. Alderman Williamson.
Okay, thank
Do
you,
you call him?
Madam Chair. Thanks for coming. Mr. Franks, you gave us a wealth of information,
Thank you.
enlightened us on a lot of things we're just very unaware of, that seems to mention. Wanted to ask you, and I know you mentioned the DROP program, and I thought when you enter the DROP program that your time of service just freezes.
For that 5-year period, you're
Right.
correct,
Okay,
Alderman.
for 5 years. So after that 5 years, if you do the 5 years and expire, then it goes back, if you've been 20 years, then it goes to the 21.
Yeah, and that's where it gets so costly.
That's where- I got
Right.
you. Right.
That's where it gets so costly. The plans were never designed to be that way. We've got a Cadillac program. They were designed that you either left or you started a new year. And our program, I haven't seen another one like it, to be truthful.
City employees, when they retire, what is it? Is it 40% of their last 2 years of salary? Is it 38? How does that work?
There's a calculation, but if you reach the rule of 85,
Right.
you get about 43%. Yeah, that's a very, very good estimate.
What is Fire West Police?
It's 75%.
That's why they don't receive Social Security.
Right,
Because they're-
but even with Social Security, and I would tell the committee that, for instance, the St. Louis County, their benefits are very different. They have Social Security, but even with the Social Security, they only pay about 23% of salary. We're at over 46. And that's something else I can share with the committee. I've done side-by-side benefit comparisons as well as side-by-side pension comparisons in electronic format, if you're interested.
Definitely.
Yes.
I'll send that to you as well.
So what's your opinion between the police and the fire in the city of St. Louis and the county when it comes to benefit and retirement?
Ours is much stronger.
Okay, and that's
Much stronger.
That's what I'm hearing, so
Yeah.
it is much stronger.
The legislation which is being proposed in Jeff City was done without my input, which was unfortunate because I'm a negotiator. And it proposes to take the final average compensation basically from 75% down to 70, change the drop program so that you can't come back in, and then it changes the contribution rate because they have to contribute from 7% to 8%. Well, I'm like, well, why didn't they follow FRP? FRP is 9%. So they didn't
They
even.
should be comparable. Yeah.
I thought so, but they didn't even take it as far as what FRP did. But that is now being held hostage in the Senate, and I don't know.
Who's the sponsor of that?
Of that, I can't pronounce his
Okay.
name, I'm sorry, I can find it for you.
No problem, I thought you just might have a tip of your tongue. I'm sorry, Alderman.
But it passed through the House, but I'm hearing they may filibuster it to death. But one of the things that I've agreed to do is that if it does not pass, I've talked to Jeff Rorta and the SLPOA, and I'm gonna go back to the table and negotiate pension reform. And if we can save the city some money, maybe we can pay our officers a little bit more too. So that's something that's actually in our agreement, is that we will come back if that does not pass and try and get pension reform negotiated here in the city, which is where I believe it should be.
I'd really like to be a part of that.
Alderwoman.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple more, I'm almost done. And you had mentioned the police and the fire, but especially the police department. Well, we got local control. And I think you looked at some of the benefits and some of the things they were doing with the overtime. And we really appreciate your hard work and being diligent and investigating on the cost savings. So when that did happen, merging them with the city of St. Louis and being local control, how much of a savings of money for the city of St. Louis, that since we kind of oversee them now, and so you got kind of more of a check and balances with the
Right.
police department. They really can't get away with a lot of things they used to do.
They're still trying.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of support from Judge Jimmy Edwards because he believes that the Department of Personnel Administrative Regulations and the compensation ordinance should rule the police as well. And for instance, police lieutenants were getting all sorts of overtime, and it's not authorized by the compensation ordinance. And, the mayor was furious. She says, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, the former police chief ignored me. He's violating the ordinance." And then they got a legal opinion that they could do it. And, I'm sorry,
Basically, they were still.
there was, yes, and I think that, an audit will reveal that. The comptroller's audit revealed it, and I think the state audit will reveal it. That was still occurring. Judge Edwards is more supportive, and he understands that as a charter city, the state cannot pass any legislation that interferes with the powers, duties, or compensation of a charter official, whether that's me, the commission, or this board. And that's what they have attempted to do on several occasions, So I think part of the local control statute, I think it's 84344, is unconstitutional on its face because it attempts to limit some of the authority of these entities, and they can't do it. So that eventually probably will end up in court. But we have saved money. We saved over $4 million by combining the police benefits, for instance. We saved $536,000 because the police for 12 years did not go out to bid for their retiree insurance. And as you know, or I should say, our police officers hired prior to 9/113 have all their health insurance paid. It costs between $12,000 and $14,000 a year to this city. Mercifully, we have interpreted that after 9/113, they will no longer continue to receive that. They're in with our plan then. They'll have to pay for their own. So we will start seeing a huge cost savings as we amortize that out. But that was, we fought that in court. We won in circuit court. We won in the Court of Appeals. But then the former Board of Police Commissioners went too far. The plan that they offered the retirees was not strong enough. It was only a 60% value. You need about 70% value for it to be considered an actual insurance plan. So they basically tried to really hose them, and the Supreme Court didn't buy it, slapped us on the wrist, said you're stuck with it. So we're stuck with paying those costs until 9/113. And so, we were kind of devastated, but the former Board of Police Commissioners kind of just did things as they wanted. They entered into a 65-page collective bargaining agreement with the police organization 1 month before they were disbanded. So we were bound by that predecessor agreement. But one of the things that I'm really happy about that saved us, will certainly future save us money, is that we were able to negotiate away impasse arbitration and binding arbitration for non-economic issues, and also strictly limit the authority of the arbitrator. They can't arbitrate anything now that comes under my authority or the Civil Service Commission's. And that was a bitter fight to get that. But Judge Bush was behind us, and we will see a potential savings because that means that I'm no longer bound by some of those provisions, or some arbitrator who may or may not be friendly to the city just makes up their ruling, and they're not bound by any kind of court decisions or anything. So now instead of paying an arbitrator $450 an hour, we can pay $150 and get a declaratory judgment. We also saved, but with Benistar though, there was some funny business going on, and they didn't even have contracts. The police department had no contracts in place to pay for any of its legal bills, any of its insurance, any of its long-term disability, its accidental death and dismemberment, its dental, its vision. They had no contracts. They just did it on a purchase order, which was in violation of city law. So the Department of Personnel went through, and we went through the RFP process and rebid all those, and we brought dental insurance down. We were able to bring up their level at the same cost of their long-term disability. And with the Benistar, the retiree health insurance, we brought them better benefits, we gave them a better cost for their pharmacy, and we saved, now this is off the top, $536,000. $536,000. I felt horrible though, because I thought we were getting hosed, pardon my French, for all these years, you know? Now we're going out to look at Aflac. Now I'm sure some of you love Aflac, some of you may not, but I looked at Aflac, for instance. We pay they get $1.98 million in premiums from the city, but they only pay out $900,000.
Wow.
So some account rep is getting really rich, you know? I mean, they're making $1 million a year right off the top. So we need to educate our employees, and that's why we're going through an open enrollment period and an RFP process, to see if employees can have more of a choice with that. So there's a number of things that we're doing, even with our health insurance rates this year. We're very aggressive. They came back with a 10.5% increase, and we said no. Then they got it down to 10, and we finally got it down to 6.5%, which isn't much. We pay for 95% of the costs of health care on the low option. I have the low option. It's a very strong plan. I mentioned the 60% actuarial value is a low plan. We've got one of those. And then 80% is good. Our low plan is about 85%. We're one of the few companies around that pays 100% for diagnostic care and for preventative care. And I'll tell you that's an amazing benefit, because you go in and after you meet your deductible, everything is free. And but we're finding that our younger employees don't really appreciate it. So one of the things I'm going to be talking about, and hopefully I'll see Alderman Arnowitz and Alderman Tias at the meetings, is next year maybe we need to talk about, maybe we're spending too much money. We spend almost $7,900 on each employee for health insurance. I've kept the police in a separate category, and the reason is, and they have slightly better benefits than us, but because they're so young, I only pay $4,900 for them. And the insurance company lets me do it. So they get a better benefit, but by me carving them out, I'm saving money. We saved money with the law department. Winston Calvert wasn't here long, but we went through and found out that they had some they weren't contracts. They were paying Evans and Dixon $20,000 a month for workers' comp services. I went through, now I had my jeans on, I rolled up my sleeves, and I found the contract, which was from 1997 in their basement. And I told Winston, get rid of it. It's gone, cease and desist, And now I'm meeting with our third-party administrator, CCMSI, and I'm meeting with our capitation, which means if the claims are really high, because the prior administration forced us to take Barnes Care for workers' comp. And they made all these promises. If you give us Barnes Care, citywide, we'll reduce your amount of money you pay. We're now paying $17 million a year in workers' comp, and you know where most of it comes from? Police vehicular accidents. 47% is coming from the police. And I can get you that report too.
Oh, yeah.
You need to come visit my office. I'll buy you
why I
that
want
book.
that one, okay?
I'm going to show you that CCMSI. And what was really troubling to me was once we got the year-long data, they promised that costs would go down on what we call TTD, which is temporary total disability, means, and I know Alderman, you've got a lot of
Oh,
HR
yeah.
experience, that
Yeah.
that's the days off, that people are gone. They said they'd bring it down. It's up in 1 year, 70%. 70%. Then they said for permanent partial disability, meaning we have to pay out because, you permanently hurt your arm, they were gonna bring that down, it's up 110%. Now, I am like them on white on rice now. I'm like, this is no good, you signed a 3-year contract, you're not doing what you said, and so I'm working with Deputy City Councilor Nancy Kistler. We have joint responsibility under the compensation ordinance for workers' comp to say, what the heck is going on here? So there is more money that we can be saving here
Gee, I know.
because people aren't doing their jobs. So that's kind of like an overview of how we're achieving savings, but the police still need to look at, the issue about overtime in particular. I'll give you another example. When we had the protests, I can understand overtime, but when we had the presidential debate, that cost us $700,000 in overtime to send people to Wash U. Why didn't Wash U pay for it?
Thank you very much.
They spent $40 million to dig up their parking lot in front of their sewer in front of their gymnasium.
Wash
But
U's
they didn't
got
write
deep
us a
Hey,
check.
don't talk about WashU now.
And but they got some money.
They can
got
afford
some
it,
money.
that's right, Wash U can afford it.
And even more troubling,
people go free.
even more troubling, and this board needs to know this, with this police grant overtime, you'll hear them always saying, we need police grant overtime. It doesn't cost the city anything. It doesn't cost the city anything because it's coming from the grants. What happens is that because the charter does not allow police officers to work, or any city employee, except for a teacher, to work for another political subdivision,
Exactly.
what they will do is they will get the institution, like say the Dome or some other public agency, to write them a check. It gets processed through PeopleSoft, which is the police's separate payroll, and then they have to somehow convert that rate. They might get $80 an hour for doing this, for being a security guard somewhere for the Dome. Well, they got to somehow figure that into the PeopleSoft, so what they do is a little magic. This person actually only makes $30 an hour. So they have to figure it out as overtime. Well, overtime's time and a half. Let's see, that's $30, that's $45. Whoa, that means that's the equivalent of, like $90. You're seeing that it starts getting inflated. So you get this long list of people, many officers and sergeants, lieutenants, and even a captain who are getting this quote-unquote grant overtime for working these secondary jobs. I have no problem with that, but I do have a problem with the way they're calculating it. And then to make matters worse, my office discovered that, and the budget director wasn't even aware of this, that we weren't collecting on some of those contracts. For last year, for 2017, we had a minus of $1.1 million on one of those contracts. Might have been 2016. One of those contractors did not pay the city $1.1 million. In 2014, it was $400,000, and we're not even going after these people. So that's why it's very important, and I've spoken with the comptroller, that we get a handle on these contracts and make sure that the money is coming into the city coffers. So those are the kind of economies I call that just due diligence. The next thing is if we can get an IT system that really works, then I can start doing some business analytics, finding out, how much each department's actually, what they're doing. In last year's budget, I had to clear 3 positions supernumerary. One of the department heads wanted a 3rd special assistant. They were doing all the same things, so I said, no, you're not going to get it. Then they wanted somebody who was going to be over the fiscal manager for the police. That's the top level position. No, you're not going to get it.
Right.
And then they wanted a 3rd deputy city councilor. Really? for a staff?
And I think we should cut the city councilor since they let everybody else write their board bills anyway, so we don't need city council. We can just let Lewis and Rice write theirs. We can let all these other people who write the bills, and we can get rid of most of the city councilors, okay?
So that's kind of like an overview of the other side of my responsibility, to sort of be the watchdog and
Right.
report back to the board as necessary, and also, to the mayor, I speak with her as necessary, that, look, these things are occurring, and I have a certain amount of authority, but then the board has more authority. There's things that we need to address through the compensation ordinance. one of the things that I am planning on doing is, because of the overtime issue, a lot of the police exceeded the 600 threshold that's established in the compensation ordinance. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to ask the Board of Public Employees to, under extraordinary circumstances, give me the authority upon written request to waive that until we can get those numbers down, because the police are afraid that they're going to lose those hours, and they're really not in compliance with what the compensation ordinance is saying.
Okay, you have any more
No,
questions?
Sorry for the
Thank you.
long-winded.
No,
No,
I'm trying to
no,
be
no.
briefer.
I'm gonna go back and watch this tape, okay?
Charlie, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, the next
Okay.
person is Alderwoman Davis.
I don't even know what to say.
I know, we're like,
Oh, my God, okay.
Well, my dear friend Joanne, I talked to her last night, she said, just tell the truth, we're having
That's
one.
correct.
The truth is what it is.
I'm gonna take this and download it.
Well, one of the things I just talked about this morning with Alderman Williamson is, we have the money so that we can have a balanced budget. But we've just got to work together and make sure we correct those things that need to be corrected. And collect the money that we should be collecting and not let it just lay out there delinquent. But I'm a little disturbed. And the last time I was this disturbed was when I was president of the school board. And it wasn't nice for anybody, because you have to get in these budgets, you have to look at what people are doing. And just the few things you've mentioned here, believe me, it's 10 times worse, because you haven't had time to do all of it. But we really have to look at our structure, how things are being paid. I know we kind of touched on it at some point last year, because we had guys who were making over $100,000 in overtime. And that doesn't make much sense. And it's not fair to the other employees either. So I appreciate the things that you've said. I think Ways and Means has to work very close with you to look at those things. Our retirement system has to be, we have to finish correcting it, okay? We took a lot of heat when we dealt with the Local 73, when we changed them over to the other plan. But we knew it was for the best for the city. And actually, they're better off. They may not want to admit it, but they are.
I think there are too, and as I said, the disabilities have gone down.
Yes.
And the plan is running smoothly. We got our first experience study, a 5-year study, and this was really pleasant, compared to what they thought we should have to be contributing, instead of 9.5 million, it was like 7.9 million. So the budget director was really happy, meaning the plan is functioning really, really well.
Right.
And part of that is through, appropriate management. When you look at the administrative costs, people don't like to talk about that, but as far as I'm concerned, FRS is a closed plan. It needs to be planning how to cut staff, how to take down services. It's not doing
It's
that.
not doing it.
It needs to be
The
doing
entire
that.
city needs to do that.
We need to look and have that
Yeah.
kind of plan about how we're going to
Right.
economize. And if you look at the administrative costs for the police system, it's very high. So those are things to consider, and I think, again, going back to that PFM study as well, we really need to look and challenge ourselves about, do we need all these management positions? Are these necessary? Certain divisions, you'll see with the organizational charts, look very top-heavy.
Right, the people who are managing 2 people. There's no such thing as that. I've seen it.
Himself and one other.
Oh, yeah. I've been talking about it ever since I've been here. I've never seen a system that didn't go in and recalibrate itself, because you don't still need the same people now that you have improved on technology and services are being done by other entities. It can't just stay the same. You've got to look at the whole system. And so I heard a lot of stuff that you said, and we got to look at it.
I agree.
I don't have any questions.
I know.
'Cause I can't open myself up for questions right now.
Okay, Alderman Arnowitz?
Director, thank you for coming over today. So all the things I'm listening to tells me I was way underpaid as an investigator. I should have been a manager over myself. But anyway, no, and few things you talked about, are some of my pet peeves that I really would like to see change. One thing is, when people retire, I know there's a certain time to come back. To me, I think that's terrible. When you retire, you retire. You put that application for that job opening out there, so you're getting people, and I'll take my dear friend Charlene Deacon, is getting a nice pension check a month, plus coming back to work and getting that salary. And she's not the only one. A lot of people would do that just for that reason. I always thought that was wrong, and I think it costs us more money than we should be paying if you add everybody up that comes back. I know they don't get benefits, but they're still getting a salary. So when you're vested the 5 years in the drop plan, and say you're gonna work another 5 years, so you're still collecting interest every year on top of that,
Yeah.
correct? Yes.
Yeah, and if you retire from the drop program and come back in, not only are you getting those probably getting some raises, you
Right.
may be topped out, but it also adds to the years of service, which go into that calculation, and they mean more at the end.
Yeah.
So that's the big issue.
Rates higher.
With respect to the per performance, I will say this, per performance employees, our general policy, with very, I think with maybe one exception or two exceptions, are paid at the very bottom of the scale. So what we do is we're able to use the institutional knowledge of these people, and, you know, they can make I'll give an example. My deputy, Linda Thomas, in 4 hours, she can get done what other people take 40. You know, so it's very efficient.
Right.
There is a waiting period, and that's because of the IRS. Unless you're 62 years of age, you have to have a 90-day waiting period. It's called constructive receipt. And basically, the IRS has opined that that would be a violation of our IRS qualification. If you're a fireman or if you're a police officer, you have to only be 55. It's called the safe harbor provision. It's really technical, but we got an opinion from Dana McCatrick that people who are not 62 did have to wait, you know, the 90 days. But overall, I know it's the position of the budget director that it's an efficient use of people. We just can't allow under civil service per performance people to replace full-time employees. You know, that's what I can't allow, you know, because that would be against the charter, Article 1 of the charter. I had to watch that very carefully when we didn't have enough people in, you know, fleet maintenance to work on the fire engines, you know. So I had to watch that, and as soon as we got qualified people to fill those civil service jobs, you know, sorry, your contract people have to go bye-bye. In similar fashion, I don't allow contract people to make more than our full-time staff. The staff, I get requests from directors wanting to pay these people
I know.
$60 an hour, and wait, the other person only makes $20 an hour. You know, what does that look like to the employees? So I'm charged under the charter with balancing those different things, and ultimately goes into the compensation ordinance as well. So.
And I understand that, and I thank you for that. The other thing is, I know we're top-heavy on the police department with white shirts. To me, personally, I'm actually gonna try working on a bill to reduce that, and I guess through attrition of cutting a bunch of these positions of white shirts that is really not needed, you know. We right now, and we lose money and they lose money for the regular policemen. I mean, and I got some comparisons coming in. A city this size with 311,000 people does not need 4 lieutenant colonels in this city. We went up to 6 majors, which you really need no more than 3. 1 for each district and the substation. Captains can come up and do what majors do, and they do it all the time. Lieutenants can come up and do what they do. We actually have a sergeant for every 3 policemen on the streets. When we had more police officers, it was a sergeant for every 7.
Yeah, 6 or 7.
6 or 7. So, and I think overall, and my thinking here is, if we can accomplish this, I mean, it's a great, it'd be a good savings for the city pension-wise, salary-wise, that can funnel back into there where, you know, we're not trying to find more money or doing a sales tax, this, that, and everything else, or throughout the city budget in general. I mean, because my whole theory is, I worked 35 years for the city, as you well know. And, you know, health insurance goes up every year, so when you get a 1.5% to 2% raise, you lose money. And I, you know, I'm the first to admit, you know, it's the average, you know, we should be able to give them at least a 4% raise, minimum.
That's one of the reasons I'm suggesting, Alderman, that we change the drop program, because all I'm able to offer this
Yes.
year is one, and I'm doing it for 2 years, so that people have the certainty. And even if you're at step 30, even if you've been over max, you're gonna get that 1.5% for 2 years. In terms of how our process works, I can only, under the charter, when I can declare a position unnecessary,
Right.
is when a requisition comes in. So what happens is that, you know, these people, you know, these different directors submit their budgets. You know, they submit their budgets, and it goes to Ways and Means and to E&A and all this, and they'll put more new positions in there. And as I said, just last year, I eliminated 3 because they sent in a requisition. One was in the water division, one was in the police department, and the other one was in the law department. And I said no to all 3, and I caught all sorts of hell from all 3
I
of
believe
those
that.
directors. And you know, I really don't care. You know, it's gone. And, you know, the Civil Service Commission they could appeal it to the Civil Service Commission, but the commission can only make a recommendation to me. Anytime a person wants to fill a job, and the auditors like this, they have to fill out a requisition, that starts the process, and then they have to submit it to the Department of Personnel with 5 or 6 of the essential functions under ADA. And then we make sure, we look back historically to see, where is this person, is it budgeted in the table of organization? Is this doing what it should be doing? Is it trying to work outside of its classification? Are they supervising the people they claim? Because all sorts of funny business goes on. And so that's my department's job in personal services, as you probably know, to make sure that that's correct. And then if we think it's unnecessary, we declare it supernumerary, or we send it back, you know, and say, no, this isn't what it is. You're trying to say this is an administrative assistant 3, doing the same job as an administrative assistant 1. So those are all sort of things that personnel has to be the watchdog for, and it makes the departments angry sometimes, but
Oh, no, I agree.
I think, you know, in terms of the span of control, I sent the chairperson here studies that were done by the ICMA that were buried. And one was on fire and one was on police. And I can tell you, like, even in terms of staffing levels, both studies basically said, in short, that we have more than enough
Exactly.
That's what
staff.
everybody says.
And then there was another
I
study
just told y'all
done.
that yesterday.
There was another study done by a different group in, I think, 2017 on the police division, and it said the same thing. It's a short study, it's not very well done. But, and particularly, what I like to look at is comparisons. And if you look at our administrative staff compared to St. Louis County, they're much leaner than we are. And, you know, I'm not anti-police.
And that's
I get
my-
along with Rora, I'm not anti-police.
And that's my point about the being top heavy.
But those are your decisions, those, I don't have that
No, I
authority.
know.
If the position's filled, I don't have that authority, that's Ways and Means and E&A, you know, that's over my pay grade.
But I think, to me personally, I think that's something that needs to be done, and that's what I'm gonna try and put that
I
together.
certainly respect what you're saying. I will say there's been a recent reorganization, if all the people are not aware. This is novel. We had I've been told by Judge Edwards that Commissioner Hayden took the lieutenants and put them out to the different areas.
Lieutenant colonels.
Lieutenant colonels,
Yes, they're at
right.
the stations.
Yeah, and now the majors are reporting directly to him, I understand.
And from what I heard years ago, it was that way.
And something else I just did is, E&A allowed this, and I got rid of it finally. Loved Chief Jenkerson, but he had 5 deputy chiefs. Now, you need 1 for the A shift, 1 for the B shift,
One for the
1 for
C.
C, and 1 for the bat chief. And then I found out that he had 1 who was over EMS, who didn't even have a license to be over EMS, and was costing the city a lot of money in terms of lawsuits. And so, you know what I did? I yanked his title. I literally had a signed document to an EEOC claim, a settlement agreement, and it took him a year, and I finally said, fine, I'm done. I did it. Yanked him out of FRS, changed his job class title. He's done. He's got 4 chiefs now, deputy chiefs, and that's what he should have.
Well, Director, I don't have any more, but I always appreciate you coming over, and it's always good to see you.
It's good to see you. We missed you as an investigator. I'll tell you, the one person who made so much money in the law department was Patrick. I don't know if you knew him. I didn't know him personally, but he was an investigator, and he was routinely saving the city $500,000 to $600,000 on subrogation claims, going out and investigating those false claims against the city and getting the money. And we lost him. I tried to give him a 10% increase to when we moved out to St. Charles. So.
That was more than I got off of that. I took care of 200 positions.
You're wealthy, Alderman, okay. Alderman Coulter, do you have anything else?
No, I'm done, thank you.
Alderman Coulter?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate you being here. It's been very enlightening.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Alderwoman Green?
Thank you. This has been very
I hope I haven't ruined all your days.
No,
I mean, all this stuff
This
is
is
out
a
there.
Fix it, you gotta face it.
I think we're realizing we have a lot of work to do here. A few questions. How many vacant positions do we have right now?
Over 100.
Okay. And is there a particular department where we're really struggling to?
Well,
Fill
the police
positions.
were, and when I say 100, that's excluding the police. We're about 110 done with the police. When we attend job fairs, 40% of the time we're told is because people don't want to live with the residency rule. It's killing us. We have problems getting HEO2s, the heavy equipment operators. We can't reach out to Sauget, Cahokia, Ferguson, et cetera. And if somebody has a DUI, they lose their license. So we have a lot of problems with that. What I am doing in terms of trying to solve some of the vacancies is I'm working more with what I'm calling recruitment rates, meaning that I'm having to start people at a higher salary. So I've reached out to some of the departments. I've just approved increasing the pay for stationary engineers, so they're starting at a higher rate. Electricians, we can't get electricians. I've just signed off on that yesterday. I'm looking at water meter workers. We compare. We not only use the BLS data, which is the Regional Department of Labor data, which is 200 employers, but we go and compare to 20 to 30 sister cities, and then we see where we're at. But in any job, when I say 100 positions, I should say, we have 100 examinations open right now. It's a heavy load. We're seeing a lot of turnover in certain areas, and particularly like in fleet maintenance and the trades, the skilled trades. Difficult to get these people. And the police officers, and it's not just been a post-Ferguson. Everybody wants to say it's post-Ferguson. I examined 2010 to 2014, and then 2014 to 2018, almost identical amounts of departure. And only 28% left for other police jobs. What's interesting is they go into the police division, then they go to, and they learn these skills, and they're uniformed people. Now, this is the other question. They're uniform, but they're doing different types of very specific jobs. They might be doing IT, or they might be doing some kind of technical analysis. Or I just found a fireman out at the airport, and she's listed as administrative assistant. We're paying her $28,000 into her pension. She's making more money than she should, and it's bigger than anything. Oh yeah, I'm administrative, so they put it on there. So those are the kind of things that if I could get a good IT system, I could do the business analytics and start driving down further into these departments. But,
So that was actually one of my other questions is, do we have a price tag on IT software?
we're hoping to get a GO bond. I'm working with Cindy Reardon in the comptroller's office, and we're hoping that we get some money in the realm of about $5 million. It seems like the systems cost anywhere from about 2.8 to 12 million, depending on what you want it to do. And we're hopeful that we can negotiate them down. And, we're looking at Workday right now. It's a model that's been used by Denver. It's been used by some big companies locally. It's used by Riverside County, has 22,000. The departments wouldn't like me to have it, or you guys to have it, because then you really find out who's working what, who's doing what. It gives you all sorts of real information on a very easy to read kind of level. So the city desperately needs that.
So going back to a second, to the vacant positions, Right now, the city has, I think it's like a 4.5% unemployment rate, which is higher than the regional average and higher than the national average. Is it a problem where we don't have people with the skills within the city to match to the jobs that are open? And
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And we're partnering with Dr. Alice Prince and Slate to see if we can get some of these people, actually to our door. We now get about 80 or 90% of our applications online. We've had to change our recruitment strategies, also because we found that we don't get so many referrals from schools. We don't get so many referrals from the job fairs. We get more responses now online. I mean, from some, so we're on Monster, we're doing that kind of direct approach. The job fairs, as I said, has been a little disappointing, but if we find people that don't have that skill set, we try and direct them back to state. But I do think, in my humble opinion, I think if we, can move the residency, I think, I'll use this as an example, and I shared this with Alderwoman Howard. When we said we would consider a residency waiver for corrections, we've always been understaffed there, always. We had 300 applications in 2 months. 300. We didn't even have to grant a residency waiver. It was just the fact, I guess, that people felt like they were being treated as an adult, that they could live where they wanted, that if they did need the waiver, they could do it if they couldn't sell their house. And we hired like 80 correctional officers. It was amazing. Dale Glass said, this is incredible. And we didn't even have to do the waiver. I mean, we didn't even have to grant one.
So that's what I want to stop for a minute. Just what I was going to ask you. So we have a residency waiver, and when we grant one, they have to follow with the Board of Aldermen's clerk. Isn't that correct?
Yes, and
Yep.
we've only had one residency waiver granted by the commission in all these years.
But I'm just saying,
Yes.
so since that is something that we have at our disposal, and if we were having such hardships, why haven't we pushed that more to allow that to happen?
We've told the departments they can do it, but there's one bad caveat. That is that if we hire somebody on a residency waiver or a group of people, and then there's anybody who's qualified in the city who then applies, the other people immediately get thrown into layoff. And apparently that happened prior to me coming here. I've been here 14 years in June. We used to have a very, very strong IT department. And then apparently there was an influx of people, with Y2K that didn't get the jobs because, they realized there wasn't the problem. And we lost about 10 really great IT people. I mean, I heard that our IT department was decimated. We're trying to rebuild it.
So let me understand, so as soon as you get somebody that basically qualifies for the job, or do they have to be able to do the job at the same level as the person that we have?
No, they just have to qualify. They have to meet the minimums and get on the eligible list.
So my thing is, rather than just, because I'm not for getting rid of residency, I'm totally opposed to it. I'm gonna be out there full fighting against it, okay, for a whole bunch of reasons. And I was here when we changed it for the St. Louis Public School teachers. I've been around probably 20-something years. So why wouldn't we look at amending and saying that, okay, just because you're minimally qualified, instead of, I don't like legislation that enlarges too much, okay? If it's a problem that you need to address, because Beckerly brought the school board thing, Alderman Beckerly, who used to be the 25th Ward Alderman. So why wouldn't we look at amending just that part that says, just because you are minimally qualified, but if you can't do what this other person is doing, then we don't let that person go. We keep it. So instead of just saying, oh, we just need to get rid of residency, because the whole point of residency is employing our citizens, okay? So is there something that's between getting rid of it totally and kicking people off as soon as the person that becomes mentally qualified comes in?
I would defer to all your judgments about that.
But I'm saying there could be something
we
that's,
have
excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. There could be something that is in between that.
Yeah, I think that we do.
Okay, I'm sorry, Alderwoman Green.
Couple more questions, and this might be more of a question for Paul Payne, but, a number of the things that we talked about were related to settlements and things like that. I've noticed that in other cities, instead of paying it into, been trying to understand from the city councilor's office, our kind of insurance fund. It's a little bit
Very
complicated.
mysterious PFPC.
Yes.
Yeah, that they tried to hide from me.
Yes, so I got some documents on it. It's very cumbersome to understand. But what I'm seeing in other cities is they're they're requiring that settlements are being paid out of the department budget that is causing the settlement rather than into
Yes.
this fund that we are paying into.
We're starting to see that, yes.
And I was interested in your thoughts on something like that, because it might incentivize some of these settlements to not.
Something I've never understood. We don't have a formal indemnification policy.
Thank you.
I received, there's some correspondence, I know the mayor is looking at it and the city council are looking
I
at
have
it.
to.
So that we're looking at that. But one of the things that I never understood was that, for instance, with the prior sheriff, there were allegations of very serious racial discrimination, and the person did nothing about it. And it cost the city hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then, where's the accountability?
Correct.
Did it come out of that person's budget?
Correct.
That same person now is suing me because he wants a second retirement. He's got a retirement through, a 75% retirement through the state sheriff's system. But 28 years later, he's now suing me and the trustees in our individual capacity because we will not grant him an additional retirement through ERS.
Oh, shut up.
28 years later, and we tried to argue the doctrine of latches and statute of limitations and everything, and, and coming after me personally, I'm like, I'm not even a fiduciary agent, but that's what I mean, it's like there needs to be some accountability. Now, I will say for the first time, Alderwoman, it wasn't even my department, but the circuit attorney's office failed to give COBRA notification to one of its employees. They had 30 days to do it. So they were in violation. So Elkin Kistner was the attorney for this woman. Well,
Our least favorite person,
he
second
came,
least.
yeah, he came after not only the circuit attorney, but me. Because my benefits section did, we actually mailed out the notice to the person, and it was undeliverable. And he argued that we had an affirmative responsibility to find her. Well, how? So anyway, we ended up settling the case. That wasn't my decision, that was the city councilor's decision. And I thought, and originally he was seeking $57,000. They settled for $25,000. My department paid most of it out of my budget. I don't have a big budget. Kim Gardner, last time I looked, she had $1.5 million, $1.3 million. Why don't you pay it? Your people are the one that didn't do what they were supposed to do, But I think other cities do that. And I've also said with Paul, with workers' comp, when we have these people, these directors or commissioners that are not being responsible for workers' comp, to trim it out of their budget next year. That's what we did in the county. If you went through and you had some bad claims, in the county, we usually figured you'd get about a 3% discretion, in good times, 3% discretionary money that came out of it, The PFPC fund is a nonprofit, and it's really done totally at the discretion of the city councilor, but I think the indemnification issue is a huge one. I brought this up. Let's say that now we're getting police officers who are accused of assault, criminal charges, assault or excessive force. Well, what they're doing now is they're going in and they're pleading the fifth. They're our employees, so that's undermining our ability to defend the city. So what I told Judge Jimmy Edwards is, why are you indemnifying them? And number two, why are you providing them legal counsel? There's a time to break up, give them a kiss goodbye, and I would be like, you're pleading the fifth, undermining our ability to protect the city, and we're giving you legal counsel. I think these are the kinds of operational issues that those discussions need to be had, I voice my opinion, but I'm just the personnel director. So.
Oh, come on.
I let my voice be heard.
I'm very glad to hear that, because I've been thinking this.
There is a movement now, though, I think, where the city councilor's office is saying, these judgments need to come out of the department budgets.
Yeah, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there are.
And last question I just had, looking at kind of our statement of financial position, it looks like our pensions are only about 80% funded right now,
Really good.
and that is good.
Yes, actuaries would say that 70% is good. Like, I think the legislators, the state legislators' pension fund is at about 26%. But here again, riddle me this, ERS is, I believe now the highest at 82.5%. We didn't even get all the money that fire and police got back in the Nolte decision, where the city wasn't contributing. And a former chief of staff said, I'm not going to pay in the ERS, and I said, then I'm going to sue you. Then all of a sudden I got that check. Well, we gave the fire department and the police, and the fire department was funded in the mid-90s, and the police department was funded back then in the Nolte decision, which was only about 10 years ago, at 97, 98%. They're now lower than us. What is going on in that system that they have lost that much leverage? And ERS has had less money, you know, and we have gotten up to 82.5%. You know, I mean, that bothers me, you know, and I'll tell you this, I mean, the person who administers, I will say this, you know, I'm the chief negotiator for 13 unions, I run 2 pension systems, you know, amongst other things, and I'm secretary of the commission. I only make 17, and I'm not complaining, you got it, I'm not complaining about my pay, but I only make about 17,000 more than the person who only administers the police retirement system. And you look at the administrative costs. And, you know, we found out instances of potential white collar fraud in the FRS system, and nothing happened. You know,
That's by the state, I mean, police, it comes up under the state, their pensions.
right, currently they're under the state. But
That's the
I've been
problem.
having a few calls from state senators who are saying, why are the costs so high? I said, can't tell you. Look at the administrative costs. What about the investments? Look at volatility. You know, ERS has 23 different money managers, 23, because we want that kind of downside protection. What I've tried to explain, the police looked good some years, but let's say you got $10 and you lose 10%. You go down to 9. And then, oh no, we made 10% the next year. $9 plus 10% is $9.90. You're still worse off than you were before. That's what volatility does to you. Your losses are bad. You want downside protection. So what we've done at ERS, my strategy has been more of a downside. We'll do well in good years, but when the market hits low, we're going to be okay. You know, we're going to do better. We're going to outperform. But those are questions that I would have, like for the police system. It's like, how did you go from being 97% funded down to 78? You know, 78.
Something drastically wrong.
Contributions are still.
Yeah, and the contributions are still the same. You know, so those are the questions that this city needs to ask, you know, and I know I'm probably making tons of enemies here, but I'm
No, you're
at
not.
the tail end of my career, so, you know, it's, it is, the data doesn't lie. You know, it is what it is. and
Appreciate your information.
Thank you.
Those
No
are
more
excellent,
questions.
excellent questions, I mean, tough ones.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask questions, and then I'll let the people not on the committee if they have to have questions. Do the departments have to agree to a settlement? So when, the city councilor comes to a settlement, because a lot of the police get found not guilty criminally, and then we come back behind and we have these settlements, do you know if the department agrees or not?
They do. If there's a settlement agreement that involves a civil service employee, I have to approve it.
You approve it?
Unless, yeah, I also have to review and sign off on it.
Right.
If it involves the person coming back into the system. If it's not in the system, if it's litigation that's outside of me, and there's been some of those cases, no, but typically what I've seen, because I asked for copies of all of them, then what happens is the appointing authority and then either the deputy city council or the city councilor signs off on the settlement agreements.
But what if the department would say, and I'm gonna bring Julian Bush, and, because we're gonna have city council come talk to us. What if if you know this, you may not, what if the department says, no, we don't wanna settle, what happens then?
Historically, I can only speak to my experience, then it goes to court.
Okay,
You know,
Okay.
it goes to court. And I had one instance where a person who is now a sitting judge somewhere else, we had a case where a civil service examination was stolen, and I fired the employee, who was an employee of a different department, and my witnesses started being not so credible and colluding, and I knew it was going to be a costly case, and the city councilor got an offer to settle the case for $35,000 and never told me, did not tell me, and ended up costing the city $350,000. That's the kind of shenanigans. you know, that go on. And we've got some monster cases out there.
Oh, we know.
You know,
So you have to sign off on all settlements, and so you
if they're coming back into the system, maybe,
Right.
yes.
Okay, and so you have a list. Have you ever shared that with the Board of Aldermen?
A list of the settlements, all settlements are open. No, I've got all the court cases that I've got.
Could someone, not an emergency, could we look at that and have it compiled and maybe share
I mean,
it?
I've kept every single email except one.
I have a spreadsheet
Okay,
that I'm happy to share with the
Okay.
committee.
Oh, thank you, that'd be easier. Mine are just in files, but because what I found is people have selective memories here, especially people with agendas. So I like to be able to bring it back out and say, no, actually, in 2015, this is what you said. There's nothing like
Me
it,
too.
right?
okay, when we were talking about Prop P, Alderman Conway was still here, and I asked him on the floor, does he know of a complete package of employee benefits for the police? Because when I look at a complete package, like I look at that we let our police do secondary duty, and they're in our uniforms.
Yes, which I cannot believe, but yes.
Okay, so to me, that's a benefit. And there are all other kind of things. They've been driving cars home. That's a benefit, okay? In fact, I was outraged because I saw a police car. I heard they don't do this anymore out in the county. And I remember when we agreed to let them take police cars home, it was because we wanted the presence in our city neighborhoods, okay? And then when this whole thing started letting the police live where they want to after so many years.
Or the fire department.
Right, but specifically the police.
There's an E&A policy. The superseding policy is the E&A vehicle policy, and it says that no employee shall use a city vehicle for personal purposes, right? But there is one exception, and you heard about it on the TV, and that is that anybody who's at the rank of police captain or above
Correct.
can use their city vehicle for whatever they want. And so if they want to go and park it at a bar, which has happened, they go and park it at a bar.
Right.
Well, I guess the argument is that that's a deterrent to crime. I don't know. But that shows you where there's a police special order that is in conflict with an E&A policy.
Right.
And I don't know how, and I disagree, that a police policy should not be able to supersede any of my administrative regulations because, again, when the police department, a former city councilor argued that the Civil Service Commission would have to adopt a new rule for every single police policy. The paragraph, and you can look at it, it's RS Missouri 84344. It's the local control statute. All that talks about in that paragraph is police discipline. And it says the Civil Service Commission may adopt
Not shall.
rules, may adopt rules for the unique operation. This person read it as this, that the Civil Service Commission shall adopt unique rules, totally transposed it. And then it goes on to say in the same paragraph that if the Civil Service Commission does not adopt a new rule for the unique operation of police discipline, which we have, then existing civil service rules will prevail. Well, they cannot. They cannot take away my authority I have charter authority to promulgate Department of Personnel Administrative Regulations. You know, you have charter authority for the multitude of things. That on its face would be unconstitutional because, again, Missouri Constitution says that the legislature cannot promulgate rules that interfere with the powers or duties or compensation of a charter city.
So, back to my question. Do we have a list of what we say is the complete benefits package for police? Do we have something that says?
I have
this is the
something
benefit?
prepared by the budget division.
Okay.
And it's from 2017, I believe, and it shows the total cost of benefits for a regular city employee, it's like $66,000, and then
Right.
for fire, and then for police.
I would love that.
I've
to
got
see
that in electronic, I can get that to you
Okay.
today.
Do you think that it includes some of the things that we don't talk about? Or like we said, like, I don't understand. When I see that you can do secondary in your uniform, and then what happens if you get hurt? Okay, if you get hurt and you're in secondary, then who pays for that?
Well, my concern has been that ultimately the city councilor, in consultation with the mayor, makes a determination about whether or not something is covered under workers' comp.
Okay.
But we all know that there's been cases that there was the one firefighter who was assisting someone, not on part of their job, it was assisting a person, and they got hit. Firefighters are not on duty 24/7.
No.
And the city determined that it was workers' compensation, it cost us over $1 million. But there's also been police officers who the city has covered when they're even not in duty.
Right.
But they carry a gun, they're required to assist. So the argument has been pretty much that, if you're carrying a gun and you get hurt, you're gonna be covered by workers' comp. I believe the rationale has been, and this is for Judge Edwards or Commissioner Hayden has been, is that the presence of police with their uniforms on is a deterrent to crime. So I think that's why it was permitted, but that's something that's totally under their authority. Secondary employment, we have a secondary employment policy that governs all other civil service employees, but there is a collective bargaining agreement that talks about secondary employment, and that was something we inherited and had to abide by as a result. So it's something else we want to try and negotiate
Tell you
away.
what they doing.
Wait, hold on just a minute. Hold that thought. Do you believe that the city police department is now fully integrated as civil service employees, or are we still working on that?
We're still working on it.
Okay. I'm gonna pause because you have a question here, and then I.
Are you aware that the people that work secondary at these different businesses, they're having these businesses get additional insurance so that they can cover their workman's comp if something happens?
No, I didn't know that.
Well, that's what's going on. These businesses are spending extra money on their insurance to cover their workman's comp if they get hurt. So they probably,
Getting it covered both ways. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
that's
very.
factual.
But they can't, they would get caught when they file for a workman's comp, they would get caught if they
Yeah.
were.
They can't double.
That's right, they would get caught.
But they're adding extra stuff through their system that we're paying for,
Right.
that we don't need to be
And
paying
maybe they're
for.
collecting off of us and leaving
Yeah.
that guy.
I'm gonna bring that to the attention of Nancy
Yeah.
Kissick, because she's really our expert on workers' comp too.
What
Yeah.
are the different kinds of positions under civil service? Classified?
Well, there's
Accepted.
anything in the compensation ordinance is classified. We have about 6,700 full-time civil service positions that are authorized, and from any time, like maybe 500 to 900 per performance, like the seasonal workers, et cetera. And then there's a few, not many, what we call the accepted positions
Right.
with the capital E. Those are the ones that are appointed by the mayor that do not have to go through the civil service system. They're not bound by any of our rules or regulations, et cetera. Those are totally under her control.
And is that the same thing with the Board of Aldermen staff?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, they're not even, the Board of Alderman staff are not even in the classified service. They're just like a unique entity
right,
under
because they're
itself.
hired every year.
Correct.
Okay, and then we have pay performance and seasonal, is that
Yeah,
under?
per performance and seasonal, and we also have what we call limited term. If
Okay.
we have something that's like a grant, what we do in an abundance of transparency, we'll say, we want to hire you to run this grant, but it's only for 2 years, so we'll put that on our job announcement, that it's, for 2 years only, limited term, so that they know,
And what is that called, grant?
limited term.
Limited term, and I think Mr. Patrick Brown in the mayor's office it's under one of those things, okay?
Right.
Okay, and, I have does the personnel department, will you help, like if a department, like the Board of Aldermen, we had problems, we needed your help, would you come in and help us if we needed?
Always. We've done
Okay,
classification.
if we asked.
We've assisted with the actual recruitment examination before, testing of
Yeah,
clerk
you
type
did,
is.
yeah.
We've done we do training, we assist with for the mayor's office even, she has asked us, and Francis asked us to, hire, assist in the hiring process. So all it takes is just a request, and we're happy to do that. Because of the county offices, they don't fall under anybody, but they don't really have experienced
Right.
HR people, so they'll sometimes ask us, Jennifer Joyce used to do it all the time. I think I've been approached by the former license collector, by Greg Daly, they'll say, can you give us some help? And anytime, we're glad to come.
And so when people take the test and when there's a job opening and then take a test, you now send 5 or 6 people?
Six.
Over,
Yeah,
and it
we
used to be
went-
3 at some?
It used to be 3, and I think
Right.
we changed it in 2006 or 7. And because we felt like 3 was just too restrictive, many other civil service systems did 5. And it was pretty overwhelming that people voted for it. I think we got like almost a 70% concurrence, so it took a charter change. But
Okay. And you talked a little bit about changing the fire test. So what are the parts of the fire test now?
Well, for the entry level, they take a written test, which is usually about on a 7th to a 9th grade level, and then they take a physical performance test as well, and then they have an oral interview. So all those are components of the examination, and then based on that, we take the top 6, people and certify them for final interviews to the fire chief.
Okay.
And, like the last exam we gave, the last entry level, we had you want to get over 4/5, for the adverse impact. And we have pretty good diversity on the list. But we're constantly kind of exploring how better to get representation, because it's my belief as HR director that our population should reflect diversity in terms of gender, age, et cetera, that our community is.
Right.
And that's why I was really happy about the settlement agreement we reached with fire to try and ameliorate this and get more diversity. I felt that way in the police department. Where are the women at? Now, we just had somebody promoted, but, if you go in and you see there's 10 command officers and there's 1 female, that sends messages to everyone, so.
Okay, now, of the physical performance, the written, physical, and oral, are they weighted? Are they equal, or what's the weight?
They're weighted, and we actually rely on the individual test consultant who comes in, who are experts. The test consultants come in and look at every single component of the exam. They come on site, they look at the duties, they meet with the chief, they meet with the command staff, they look at the operating manuals. They evaluate each of the different components and then make a proposal to us in terms of what they believe, each of these things should be weighted. For instance, by the time you get to captain, there isn't really a written test because there's already assumption that those procedures or you wouldn't be there. But to get to, from a firefighter to captain, you have to know these standard operating procedures, and the best way to do that is probably through, written test.
So the entry, I'm just, I guess, speaking to entry. So the entry, what's the percentage of written, physical, and oral? Can you?
It changes, but I can get it.
It changes with each time?
It typically stays about the same, but each test consultant that we hire might have a different view on that.
And how often do you hire a test consultant?
Well, it hasn't been too often. I think we last gave an exam for the entry level in 2013, but we just don't have money. We put in money, for instance, in our budget this year. We wanted to do police sergeant testing, and then we wanted to do fire testing, but I've been advised that that money's been taken out, so,
Okay, but I'm trying to understand this. So one consultant comes in and says, because when I came in 90s, the actual physical part of the fire was way more heavily weighted than the written part, okay? And then someplace while we were here, all of a sudden became written, and I'm talking about entry level, written became much more important than the actual physical part, which I didn't understand, because I don't care if you can take a test. If I'm in a fire, I want you to be able to carry me out, okay? So I always disagreed with that. And I also saw a substantial decrease in African Americans who became was able to be entered into entry fire positions when they changed that. So many African American firefighters came to me and felt like they did that because they were doing so well in the actual physical part. So I guess I don't understand why we keep, are we updating? Is that why we hire new consultants, or why we change consultants?
There's only about 4 major players in the area, just sort of like insurance. There's Cigna, Aetna, there's less and less. There's only probably 4 or 5 firms. The last time we went out to bid, we only got 4 responses. People who could actually have the capacity to validate the test and defend it in court if necessary. But the entire period I've been here, the physical performance test has just been pass-fail. I mean, you can either do it or you can't. It's not been scored. But I will tell you that in the last promotional exam, I looked to see what the performance was, and it was almost equal between African Americans and whites. And many times we have no females that can pass it. But it's a bona fide occupational qualification. As you said, you've got to be able to do it. So even though
That's why at Hooters they can say no males, okay?
right,
Right.
I've talked to fire in the settlement agreement about the written test for captain, and it's a multiple choice, And they want it to be pass-fail. And I said, be careful what you wish for, though, because it may have worse adverse impact. So I agreed to it, along with a number of other changes, which you'll see, but we'll see how it works. We'll see if it, helps people to have it pass-fail. What we're hoping is that if it's pass-fail in the written, then when they get to the assessment part, which is gonna have 2 blacks and 2 non-black people, then that's gonna become 100% of the score. And the studies show that that's the most accurate, the most valid part of the process. So we're hoping then we're gonna see more diversity throughout all ranges in the list and not just,
Right.
clumped together. Excellent question, but and I can get that for you too on our last posting because it was from 2013, but I think it's like 30% written, that pass-fail is like, is the physical performance, and then like the other big part of it is the oral interview, which has a lot more it's much more valid than the other components, so.
And so I've been doing research because I'm very concerned about these not guilty with the police, and then we go and we make these giant settlements. And I don't think that just because you're not guilty, but then we're finding that you are, that civilly we can find you liable. My constituents don't want to pay that. They don't, that we can't tear down buildings, we can't cut grass. So I've been doing research about, because as a lawyer, when I practice law, I have to have professional liability, okay? Doctors have to have it. So I went online and started doing research about police officers having some kind of liability, and pay their own insurance. I know they're not gonna like to hear it, but if you're being found guilty civilly of not a good shoot, then I don't think I should have to pay that, or any of these people sitting at this
I think
table.
that comes that whole issue of indemnification
Right.
next to it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's something I'm going to want to talk to you about. Additionally, you and I have previously, because I've been working on this police issue of drug testing.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I'm going to come back with something that I know the police won't like, and I don't even have to apologize anymore about not being anti-police, because I'm pro-citizens of the city of St. Louis, and that includes the police and everybody else. So I still want to come back. I'm going to send you back now as the chair of public employees, my thoughts about, because I know we have some very soft drug testing, but I think that in talking to other cities, they have some much more strong things that can be done. They actually can send people out and do drug testing on the site.
We've got that now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we've got an updated policy.
Okay.
I've been waiting for a legal opinion.
I remember first they said you couldn't even do it. It's amazing how things just change,
Yeah.
okay?
We've got the critical incident, post-critical incident testing. It's in there. We are now needing to add language that says that just because you behaviorally may not show signs or symptoms. We had someone in the academy who was bragging about using drugs, cocaine, to other cadets. Well, first of all, get rid of them.
Right.
That's inappropriate conduct.
He's a fool.
Yeah, but, I asked for a legal opinion, and it says that yes, we can. That if we have credible belief, if the person is credible, who's telling me, like, I saw, Sharon Tyus doing such and such, or me, or whatever, that is enough to.
In the law, if a
In
person
the-
makes a statement against self-interest, that's the exception to
Yeah.
hearsay. Okay, and that will be introduced into court. So if somebody's walking around saying that in itself, and you have a credible person that heard it, that's an exception to hearsay. And they will let it, if you try in cases, okay?
That's totally concurrent with the legal opinion. So we're crafting that language, and then we're adding the excise division because we realized that with them working with liquor, they needed to be added. I think I think the policies, and I've added, of course, the breathalyzer. Jeff Rorta was having fits. I said, you can spin around your head all you want. I don't care. If you smell
Could
like
you drop
alcohol.
him on that? No, okay.
And we do have on site now. So, and the other thing that I changed is the police department was only doing drug testing on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Now, it doesn't take any idiot. Cocaine stays in your system 13 hours. Whoa, it's Thursday.
All right. Exactly.
So, no, you don't know when you're gonna get tested, We've agreed that we won't test them on their day off, but any other day of the week, and nobody's gonna know, so.
Okay.
I think it's been strengthened. I've got a lot of information I will send to you, and I know if I said electronic, you can get it to the other committee members.
We have the newest alderperson here, and she sat so quietly, and I want her to be able to, we're gonna wrap it up, but I want her to be able to ask some questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chairman, for that. I'm curious about the technology that you use for processing applications and.
And stop for a minute, and she is an attorney also.
Oh, okay.
We've actually met before,
Okay.
so good, thanks. So technology, when people are applying for jobs with the city, because I've had some constituents approach me and say, I tried to apply for a job for the city. We're talking master's level programs, and they felt like they met the requirements, but they received automatic rejection. And I'm wondering. So I guess kind of a two-part question. The jobs that are, the positions that are open right now, is there any attempt to go back and evaluate whether our requirements are too high, or if applications are getting rejected that are improperly rejected, or, are people being rejected because they're overqualified for so kind of where on these sort of higher level positions, what are sort of checks and balances to that to make sure that we're not rejecting people that don't need to be rejected and that our requirements fit the job?
First of all, we have a system called Sigma. I'd like to replace it with NeoGov, which is the updated version, but it's an applicant tracking system. We can verify whether or not somebody actually applied or not through the mainframe. I have a team of analysts, and if there's any kind of question about the qualifications that somebody might have, we then have them confer with either the assistant manager or the manager. It may be that we have 60 people apply for a job and we're only going to look at the top 20, for practical reasons, so the person would get a rejection letter. In the past, and I've changed this, if a person submitted an incomplete application, or just submitted a curriculum vitae or something and didn't fill out our city application, they would be rejected. We've changed that. Now we send them a notice saying, your application is incomplete. Please, send in this following information, and this is who to contact. And then further, the person has a right to appeal any kind of rejection to me, and I review those personally as director within 10 days.
Okay.
And then they can appeal that to the Civil Service Commission. Doesn't happen too often, but it does.
Okay.
And sometimes I don't agree with my staff, so I see that either myself or my deputy director, we review all discipline for the city personally. So we're very hands-on with that. But anytime any person receives that kind of notice, they have a right to inquire. But if it's incomplete, that's a big thing that's changed. But it's computerized, and sometimes the person won't apply within the time frames, and they'll say, oh no, I did. Well, we go back and confirm with Sigma with the mainframe. But we're hoping that the new applicant tracking system will be even easier for the person than the current online process. But they can also come into our office and fill out a paper application for people who aren't especially computer literate or don't have access to that.
Sure. Okay. And then what's sort of the timeline from the point at which you close the window for applications to actually getting hired on these? But do you have statistics on how long that's taking?
Yeah, we do. The last time in the annual report, we're having a 2016-2017 annual report that will be issued real shortly because we've changed it to make it simpler and more combined and more green. But we normally, over 90% of the time, we have an existing eligible list. So all that does is they send in a requisition, the appointing authority, within 2 days, I send them a certification. And then it's up to the appointing authority to schedule the final interviews. And they have 21 days to do that. Otherwise, the certification dies. So it really depends on the appointing authority in terms of their scheduling. If we have to open a new exam, we post it typically for 3 weeks so that we reach a wide audience and can do that. And then it takes maybe a week or two to screen through the applications, get the first round interviews, get the interview panels assembled. We find it's usually about 60 days. And that compares favorably with the private sector where it's about 90 days to fill positions. So we've got stats and all that stuff.
Okay.
Good
All right.
questions.
And I think that's what I have. Thank you.
You sure?
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? I really want to thank you. You have done an excellent job.
Thank you, ma'am.
I know this has been long.
No, these have been the toughest questions. They're very good, but I'm glad that I can be of service, and my staff and I, anytime that you need us to come over, I'm sure, Julian and Jimmy Edwards, they're all experts in their field, but I think there's some real possibilities for the city to take take harder looks at stuff, so.
No, I have one other question. You said we
Yes.
have 3 hearing officers, 3, or do we have more?
3, we have about 6.
6, and the 3 are judges?
Yeah, 3 more.
And that was Frawley and,
And Sweeney and Grady.
oh, Brady, that was the other one, okay. All right, okay. And what was the system you said you want to replace Sigma with what?
NeoGov, it's the updated system. It's
Okay.
like $40,000 and then initial cost of $50,000, but, and you know, it's been taken out of my budget. The problem with Sigma is it's an archaic system. It got bought out by NeoGov and it's, I mean, it's not the real user-friendly, like PeopleSoft at the police department. Clunky, not easy to use, not user-friendly, you know, and it's costly to upgrade, so we're hopeful that we'll have one citywide system that'll
Can I ask
interconnect
something real
everything.
quick?
Sure.
On the pension funds, what if we agreed to keep those, what level those pension funds are supposed to be at?
Well, we don't agree per se because of market volatility, we don't know.
Right.
But the state, and I failed to say this, ma'am, the state likes you to be 80% funded. And the reason I say that, you can't increase benefits unless it's 80% funded. And so 80% is the real benchmark that an actuary likes to see. And I will say this, you know, FRP is doing fantastic. It doesn't happen often, but one of our money managers was in the very top percentile. I've never seen that before. But ERS, you know, is very stable, very well funded. It's 82.5% and growing, and we've lowered our actuarial rate of return, meaning we only have to hit, you know, like 7%, and we're very confident being able to do that. We do studies based on market and inflation and project those out, so.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that costs us more money if we're not.
Oh, gosh, yes.
It
you're
costs
right.
us a lot of money.
You're very right.
And that's why I really want to look at these pension funds.
I agree. It's a lot to do.
Well, you have done a marvelous
Well,
job.
thank you so
We will
much.
bring you back again, but it won't be as long. 2 hours is a long time, but this is, we did want a primer, and you did a great
I
job.
appreciate it, and we'll have a lot to talk about with the compensation ordinance, and
But you should give us some of your wish lists. I mean, maybe we could help you out some.
I've got some thoughts. I don't know that everybody always agrees with me, but
Things
I'm-
that will make it more productive and we can cut waste, we need to do that.
I
It
think
costs
so.
money to cut waste,
I've got a
okay?
long list of stuff to send to you electronically here, and
All right.
I think it'll be eye-opening, so.
Okay. Well, with that, if nobody has any further questions, public, we don't really have to do a motion, okay? But okay, I move to adjourn the Public Employees Committee.
Second.
All opposed? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very
You
much.
really don't have to. You can just
You can just do it.
do an adjournment, right?